It was close to midnight when Mark stirred awake to the faint creak of the floorboards. At first, he thought it was the wind brushing against the windows, or maybe the house settling like it always did at night. But this sound was different, slow, dragging, deliberate. He opened his eyes, realizing the sound was coming from below them, from the basement. Next to him, Sarah was already awake, her wide eyes reflecting the dim glow from the alarm clock. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. Mark nodded, straining his ears. The noise came again, a dull scraping, then something that sounded eerily like soft footsteps pacing across the concrete floor beneath their bedroom. Mark tried to stay calm, telling her it was probably the water pipes or a raccoon trapped down there. But even as he said it, a chill ran down his spine. Their basement had no windows, no outside access, no way for an animal to get in. The sound grew louder, closer. This time, there was a faint tap, 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 as if someone was knocking from underneath the floor. Sarah grabbed his arm. "Mark, someone's down there." He got out of bed, quietly pulling on a sweatshirt, his heart pounding with each step. The hallway was pitch black except for the dim light from the living room lamp left on downstairs. As he approached the basement door, the noise suddenly stopped. Total silence. Mark hesitated, hand on the doorknob. For a long second, he just stood there, listening to his own heartbeat echo in the darkness. Then, from behind the door, 3 distinct knocks. Bang, bang, bang. Sarah gasped from the stairs, her voice trembling. "Please, don't open it." But Mark did, and the darkness seemed to breathe. The basement door groaned open, releasing a wave of cold, stale air that smelled faintly of rust and damp concrete. Mark aimed his flashlight into the darkness, but the beam quivered like a candle flame. The light barely reached the first few steps, fading into a black abyss that seemed to swallow sound itself. Sarah stood at the top of the stairs, clutching her robe tightly around her. "Mark, please don't go down there," she whispered. He didn't answer. His breath came out in misty bursts, the air far colder than it should have been for October. Each step creaked beneath his weight, echoing through the hollow basement like a warning. Halfway down, the light began to flicker. The old bulb hanging from the ceiling buzzed, dimmed, then flared to life before dying completely. The only light now was from his trembling flashlight, and even it started to pulse weakly, as though the battery was draining far too fast. He reached the bottom, scanning the room. Old boxes, tools, and shelves lined the walls, nothing unusual. But then came a sharp metallic clang from somewhere behind the water heater. He froze. The sound wasn't random, it was deliberate, almost as if someone had thrown something to get his attention. "Who's there?" Mark called out, his voice shaky but loud. Silence. Only the faint dripping of water echoed back. He moved closer, stepping around the corner. Then crack! The light bulb above him exploded, showering tiny glass shards across the floor. The flashlight flickered violently, and for half a second, the beam caught something, a figure, a tall, shadowy silhouette standing just a few feet away. Mark gasped and stumbled back, the flashlight slipping from his hand and clattering to the ground. When he grabbed it again and aimed it forward, nothing. The space was empty. But from upstairs, Sarah screamed. Sarah's scream pierced through the silence, echoing down the basement steps. Mark bolted up, nearly tripping as he rushed toward her voice. She stood frozen at the top of the stairs, trembling, pointing toward the living room. "The lights, they just turned off by themselves," she stammered. "And the front door, Mark, it's open." He hurried past her, checked the door. It was indeed wide open, the cold night wind creeping inside. He locked it and turned back toward the basement, heart pounding harder than before. "Stay here," he told her, though his own voice shook. Grabbing a lantern from the kitchen counter, he went back down. The air felt heavier now, damp and pressing against his chest. The faint smell of earth mixed with something metallic, almost like blood. He swept the lantern around, light bouncing off the walls until it landed on something strange. An old cabinet, half buried in the far corner, covered in cobwebs and dust. Mark frowned. He'd been down here dozens of times. He would have noticed it before. As he approached, a soft knock came from inside. Just once. Then silence. He froze. His mind screamed to run, but curiosity anchored him in place. He crouched, trembling hand reaching for the rusty handle. The door creaked open, revealing only empty shelves, nothing but dust, wood, and shadows. Then, whispering, soft, faint, right beside his ear. "Help me." Mark spun around, lantern shaking wildly, its light slicing through the dark. No one there. The whispers had vanished, but the air buzzed with a low hum, like static. From upstairs, Sarah called again, her voice urgent, terrified. "Mark, there's someone in the house." He turned toward the stairs, but before he could move, the basement door slammed shut, plunging him into darkness. And this time, the whisper came again, louder, closer. "Don't leave me." The sudden slam of the basement door made Mark jump, his lantern swinging wildly. The flame flickered, throwing monstrous shadows against the damp walls. He rushed up the steps and shoved at the door. Wouldn't budge. Something heavy seemed to be pressing it shut from the other side. "Sarah," he shouted, banging on the wood. No answer. The only response was the eerie hum still vibrating through the basement, like a low mechanical growl. Then, faintly, a knocking started again, this time from behind the wall. Mark froze. Slowly, he turned toward the far corner where the old cabinet stood. He stepped closer, pushing it aside with a grunt. The moment it scraped against the wall, a puff of dust rose into the air, revealing a long, thin crack running vertically down the concrete. He leaned closer, his fingers brushing the edge. It wasn't just a crack. It was a door frame, sealed and hidden beneath paint and plaster. Heart racing, he found a crowbar on a nearby shelf and wedged it into the gap. With a deep breath, he pried hard. The wall groaned, dust falling like ash, until finally, with a sharp snap, it broke open. Behind it was a small hidden room, no larger than a closet. The air that drifted out was cold and stale, untouched for years. Inside were old belongings, faded photographs, torn newspaper clippings, and a small reel-to-reel tape recorder sitting on a table. Mark stepped inside cautiously, examining the photos. Each one showed a different family in the same house, different people, same rooms. In every picture, one figure's face was blacked out with ink. Then, click, the tape recorder turned on by itself. The reel spun slowly, and from a speaker came the exact same sounds they'd heard all night. Footsteps, scraping, knocking. Mark's blood ran cold as a faint voice on the tape whispered, "You shouldn't have opened the door." The tape kept playing, crackling, echoing, and filling the hidden room with static. Mark's hands trembled as he leaned closer, trying to make sense of the distorted sounds. At first, it was just noise. Then came the whispering again, faint but unmistakable. This time it said his name. "Mark, don't leave me here." He stumbled backward, nearly tripping over the scattered photos. His heart hammered in his chest. How could a recording know his name? The realization clawed its way into his mind. These weren't old tapes. Someone had been recording them recently. Panicked, he turned to leave, calling out, "Sarah, Sarah, get out of the house." His voice echoed through the basement as he sprinted up the stairs. When he reached the door, it suddenly gave way, opening with a harsh creak. He burst into the hallway and froze. The living room lights were flickering wildly, casting long, twitching shadows on the walls. Sarah stood near the front door, pale and shaking, holding her phone. "Mark," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "Someone's been watching us." She showed him her phone screen, security footage from their cameras. It showed the basement from an angle they didn't recognize. A man was standing there, half hidden behind the furnace, holding a camera. He looked straight into the lens before the feed cut out. Mark felt sick. That's live footage," Sarah stammered. "It was recording just an hour ago." He looked toward the basement door again. It was wide open. "Whoever he is," Mark said quietly, "he's been inside this whole time." The house suddenly went silent. No hum, no static, no movement. Then, from the baby monitor in the hallway, came a voice, low, calm, and disturbingly close. "You shouldn't have found the room." Sarah dropped the phone. And upstairs, a floorboard creaked. Mark and Sarah stood frozen, staring toward the ceiling where the floorboard had creaked. Every instinct screamed to run, but fear rooted them in place. Then, faintly, came footsteps, slow, deliberate, pacing across the upstairs hallway. Sarah clutched Mark's arm. "He's up there," she whispered. Mark grabbed the nearest thing he could find, a metal fireplace poker, and crept toward the staircase. Each step moaned under his weight. The house felt alive now, breathing with every movement. At the top, the hallway was dark except for a weak glow from the guest room. The door was slightly open. He took a deep breath and pushed it. The room was empty, at least it seemed so, but then the curtains fluttered, though the window was closed. Mark stepped closer, reached out, and pulled them back. Nothing. He exhaled shakily and turned. A shadow darted past the doorway. "Sarah, get out," he yelled, racing down the hall. She was already halfway to the front door, fumbling with the lock. Mark followed, but before they could escape, a loud bang erupted behind them. The basement door had slammed shut again. Through the glass front window, they saw movement. A dark figure standing motionless at the edge of the driveway, facing the house. The streetlight flickered above him, revealing just enough to see a tall man wearing a hooded coat, his face hidden in shadow. Mark shouted, "Who are you?" The man didn't answer. He tilted his head slightly, then turned and walked into the fog, disappearing beyond the hedges. Moments later, flashing blue lights filled the street. The police had arrived. But when officers searched the area, they found no footprints leading away from the house. Only one set of prints remained, muddy, heavy, and they led back toward the basement door. Sarah looked at Mark, her face pale. The police searched every inch of the house that night. They opened closets, checked under beds, even inspected the basement again, but found nothing. No sign of forced entry, no footprints inside, no clues. Just silence and a lingering chill that clung to the walls. An officer tried to reassure them. "Probably a prank," he said. "Someone messing with your cameras." But Sarah knew better. She'd seen that man's face, or rather, the shadow of it, in the footage. And the way he looked straight into the lens wasn't random. It was personal. By morning, the house felt hollow. Mark decided to check the footage himself. He plugged the USB from the security system into his laptop and opened the latest recordings. At first, it was the usual empty rooms, flickering lights, nothing strange. But then he clicked on a file time-stamped 3:17 a.m. The video showed their bedroom. They were both asleep. The camera slowly zoomed in, the lens adjusting focus. But then, as the shot widened, Mark's blood ran cold because the angle was impossible. It was filmed from inside the basement, through a vent, pointed directly at their bed. He scrubbed forward. The image wobbled, as if the cameraman had shifted position. Then the perspective changed. The camera was now behind the furnace. A man's shoulder came into frame. Slowly, he leaned forward, his face catching the dim light. It was the same man from the driveway, and he was staring directly into the camera, whispering something inaudible. Then came the sound, the same knocking, scraping, and whispering they'd heard every night. But this time, it wasn't from the recording. It was happening again, right beneath them. Sarah screamed. Mark looked toward the basement door. It was open just a crack, the darkness breathing quietly. The final frame of the video glitched. For half a second, their own faces appeared on screen, recorded live, before everything went black.